We did come back for Brother Herndon's 90th birthday. When was that? About 2 years ago? Something like that. And it was good to see some people then. Brother Chris told me this morning that somebody had told him he needed to make sure that the message this morning was good, and he passed that information on to me. He says, you might have more control over it than him. And, preaching it's quite a task sometimes. Sometimes when you as a preacher feel like, wow, I really did a great job, and nothing happens. And other times it feels like, man, nothing, the Spirit wasn't there, nothing happened. And afterwards, man, all sorts of things happened. You just don't know. Because it's God that works so often. And I think God wants to keep us humble. Maybe that's the reason it's that way. I would like you to turn to 1 Corinthians, the 10th chapter. We might kind of want to introduce this whole series briefly by reading what was there. 1 Corinthians 10, beginning with verse 1, and we'll read through verse 7. Paul says, "For I do not want you to be unaware, brothers, that our fathers were all under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink, and they drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ." Stop there for just a moment. Notice how many blessings they had received from God. They were delivered from slavery in Egypt. They were delivered from the army of Pharaoh as he came to recapture them. They were provided food. They were provided water. All of these things. And he went with them, continued to sustain them. And it says in verse 5, "Nevertheless, with most of them, God was not pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness." Isn't that a tragedy? After all that God had done for them, God wasn't pleased with them, and they were overthrown in the wilderness. Why were they overthrown? Now, these things took place as examples for us, that we might not desire evil as they did. "Do not be idolaters, as some of them were. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play." The topic assigned to me was, do not be idolaters. Is idolatry really a problem in the modern world? I mean, that maybe is the first thing that goes through a person's mind. Is there really a problem with idolatry? Well, yes, there is. All the way from Africa, across the Indian subcontinent, Southeast Asia, and up into Asia, where the majority of the people of the world live, there is real idolatry. We saw it in China. All these pictures are from China. We saw it in China. We saw this little image up here. I didn't know what it was the whole time I was over there. But we'd go into a restaurant and you'd go to pay for your bill, and there behind the cash register was this image. And I didn't know what it was until I got back home after 4 years of being over there, and I was talking to somebody and come to find out this is an image of the God of wealth and prosperity. Guess why they had those in their business? Yeah. And then we saw others, Hindu gods. This one here is huge. The people, well, you can see people standing here. They're smaller than the end of my fingertip. This is a huge, huge, huge temple outdoors. And this one over here was in Hangzhou, and it's about 3 stories tall inside of a building. And yes, people do bow down and offer incense at these places. And so yes, there is idolatry in the world. But you might say, oh, not in the United States. Well, let's look at the incident that Paul is citing here in the Old Testament to see exactly what's involved in idol worship. What are some characteristics of worshiping idols? Let's turn in our Bibles back to Exodus 32. Beginning with verse 1. And when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people gathered themselves together to Aaron and said to him, "Up, make us gods who will go before us." Now, I want you to stop and notice that very first item there. Make gods that will go before us. If you worship an idol, you follow it. And that's what they were proposing to do, to follow their idol. Let's keep reading. "As for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." So Aaron said to them, "Take off the rings of gold that are in the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me." So all the people took off the rings of gold that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. And he received the gold from their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool and made a golden calf. And they said, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." Now look at that. These are your gods that brought you up out of the land of Egypt. Those who worship idols attribute success to their idols. And that's what they were doing here, attributing success to their idol. Now let's keep reading here. "When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made a proclamation and said, 'Tomorrow shall be a feast to the Lord.' And they rose up early the next day and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings." You notice what they're doing there? They're bringing of their wealth, their money. People devote money to their idols. And finally it says, "And the people sat down to eat and drink, and they rose up to play." People celebrate with their idols. Now there's 4 things I want you to think about idolatry. People follow them. They attribute success to them. They devote money to them. And they celebrate with them. Now, do we have anything in the United States that people do that with? Well, I'd like to talk to you about 3 problems that I see in our culture, and hopefully haven't really affected us too much, but I know that we live in American culture, and I know that because we live here, it is going to affect us some. And so I'd like to talk about 3 things that we in America oftentimes worship. Now, to introduce the first one, maybe. Yes. In about 1969 or 1970, I was asked by Brother Hunt to go down and preach at Drakesville, Iowa. Now, Drakesville was a little town of maybe 500 people if you were lucky. If you counted all the dogs, you might get 500. And it was very, very small. But there was a large church building there. This is just the front of the church building. The Christian church there was established in 1848. A huge building. I had a slide that shows the size of the building, but anyway, I don't have a picture here, so I just have the front of it. But there was a main auditorium that would probably seat 150 people or so, and then off to the side in L shape was another auditorium that would seat another 100 or so. They said they could seat 300 people in that church building. Now, that means they could have gotten all of the city in the church building, okay? But the first Sunday I was there were only 4 people there other than myself. There was Alice McConnell, this lady right here, Ted and Olive Eaton. Some of you may know the Eatons from up in Ottumwa. And then there was Nellie Hill. And those were the only people there the first Sunday I went down there to preach. Now, that was kind of an odd situation. I mean, a huge building and 4 people. Well, one day I was in the belfry looking around at things, and there were some round tin cans, about 5-gallon cans, and I pried and finally got the lids off of some of them and looked, and there were pictures. And I was amazed at the pictures of the church there. I mean, there were pictures there of wagons backed up to the windows with people standing on the wagons listening to the services. And there were notes there that said that people had to get there a half an hour early just to get a seat inside. It was just like going to a NFL football stadium before a game, and there's people lined up outside. They're all eating at the back of their pickups, and they're waiting to get in line. It's a huge celebration. That's what it was like to go to church in Drakesville, Iowa in the 1930s. Can you believe that? Wow. And the only thing that we have today that's anything remotely like that is NFL football and entertainment. And I would like to propose this morning that one of the gods in America is entertainment. The total annual spending in the United States on entertainment is $203 billion per year. Can you imagine that? What could be done with $203 billion? And if you figure that annual household spending on entertainment is almost double all charitable contributions. That's not just church contributions. That's all charitable contributions. It's almost double. So where are people putting their money? Where are people putting their money? What is it they worship? Their Bibles are TV Guide, Sports Illustrated, Rolling Stone, Cosmopolitan. Their temples are amusement parks, movie theaters, sports stadiums, racetracks, casinos. I mean, I'm always amazed when I drive between Topeka and Omaha, when I lived up there. Go by the casinos and look at the cars lined up in those places. Just amazing. And then up in Omaha, over in Council Bluffs, the casino's there. I mean, you talk about where there's money there somehow. A lot of people leave without any money. They leave it there. But, yeah, that's where they put their money. Entertainment has displaced God in the lives of many people. People skip church to attend sporting events. Yeah, they do. I mean, after all, we bought a season ticket, and some of the games are on Sunday. I mean, we put out the money for this season ticket. We can't miss a game. And so guess where they go on Sunday? Yeah, they go to the ball game. And people spend more money on a ticket than they put in an offering plate. You ever tried to buy a season ticket to an NFL game or a KU basketball game? It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. I don't know how people put out the money for it, but what is it they're worshiping? A thrill? Entertainment? That's where they're willing to put their money. People yell louder at a concert than they sing in church. Yeah, it's amazing. People watch TV instead of reading their Bibles and praying. Yeah, I just think if, the average American spends about 2 hours a day watching TV. Just imagine if you spent 2 hours a day reading the Bible. Less. My son-in-law preaches there in Fredonia, challenged us to read the Bible through in a year this year. And, I sat down and started doing reading, and I thought, well, I'll try to read 15 minutes a day, maybe 20. And you know what? About 20 minutes a day, I'm almost through the entire Bible right now. It doesn't take that. If I spent 2 hours a day reading the Bible, think where I'd have been. I'd already been through, started over again. Yeah. People say, oh, we don't have time. Yeah, oh, well, do you have time to watch TV? Yeah. Probably do. It's quite common in churches today for kids to skip church for athletic practice or games. It used to be you could depend on schools not having activities on Wednesday night because they, let out for Wednesday night prayer meetings. But how many churches have Wednesday night prayer meetings anymore? And certainly schools aren't going to stop having athletic events on Wednesday night or practice just because of church services. I mean, after all, what's more important? That we win the next game or not? Or you go to church, which is, And there's a lot of people that feel as though winning the next game is more important. Really. They do. Yeah. A number of years ago, when I was preaching in Fredonia, I was sitting in my office one evening, and all of a sudden there was a knock on the door. It was almost dark, and I went to the door, and a man introduced himself as David Bycroft. Well, David Bycroft's the minister of the church in Christian church in Tyro, Kansas, which is Tyro is a town of about 200, and the church is quite large. And anyway, he came and he was knocking on my door. And I thought, what in the world's going on? And he said, my son is playing in a baseball tournament here this week in Fredonia. And we're wondering if you have church tomorrow night, Wednesday night, because I've told my son that if he can't come to church here, if there's no church here on Wednesday night, that he can't come here and play a ball game tomorrow night. I about fell over. Wow, when's the last time you ever heard somebody say something like that? Well, it was amazing. He didn't show up. I don't know what that meant. But anyway, maybe he didn't come. But anyway, that's amazing that somebody would do something like that. So people today in the United States have made entertainment a god. They devote their money to it. They devote their time to it. They celebrate it. They follow it. I mean, you go to even a church service, and afterwards the guys are all standing around talking. And what are they following all week? Who did Kansas City Chiefs win? What happened to all the different players? Is somebody out? And you talk? Don't you hear talk like that quite often? Yeah, we follow it. So we spend money on it. We spend time on it. We follow it. We celebrate it. And we allow it to take the place of God in our lives. Exodus 34 and verse 14. With that in mind, notice what God says. For you shall worship no other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. Wow. He's jealous. When we allow something else to take his place in our lives, he's a jealous God. And we need to remember that. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 5, and it's on the board there, and I've left out a lot of the list of items that's mentioned, but it just says there, but understand this, that in the last days there will come times of difficulty for people will be, and there's a whole list of things, but I want you to notice the last few. They will be lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having appearance of godliness. Some of these people will say, oh yeah, I'm a Christian. Yeah, we go to church. Yeah. But they deny its power. Avoid such people. So entertainment is one of those things that has become a god for American people. Now I'd like to look at the second one. We'll get it here. What are we obsessed with? I said youth, but I think maybe more than youth are obsessed with this. My son Nathan went to school at Harding University down in Arkansas, and he ran cross country and track. And one day he was back home, and we were talking. I don't exactly know how this topic came up, but he said, "Dad, you know what?" He says the guys on the cross country team down there, they all shave their legs. What in the world's going on? Shave their legs. Well, I said, well, why in the world do they shave their legs? He says they want to show off their muscle definition. Yeah, the hair kind of hides a little bit. They want to show their muscles. And that's the reason they shave the hair on their legs. Man, vanity? What is that? I don't know. But you know, the truth is, beautiful and handsome people catch our eye. Yeah. They do. And when a young lady sees a special guy approaching, what's she do? Is there a mirror somewhere? You know, bathroom, something? How do I look? My hair in place? You know, yeah, that's truth. We are, you know, kind of obsessed with that, aren't we? It's part of being naturally human. I mean, after all, even animals do that. I mean, a female cardinal, what cardinal does she choose for her mate? Yeah, the male with the brightest red. That's the one. That's right. She chooses the one that's the brightest red. Yeah, that's who she'll choose for a mate. Always. I mean, if there's one that's kind of, you know, a little scraggly and brown around the edges and some stuff like that, she's not going to choose him. She's going to choose the one that's bright red. And so, yeah, we have to realize that to a certain extent, this is human nature, okay? But it can get out of hand. Okay, it can get out of hand, so I want to talk about it a little bit. Because good looks have become a god. Good looks have become a god. I was just looking online and I found this one article, 9 success factors. And notice just one little paragraph there. People judge you by the way you look on the outside, by the way you appear. The fact is, you judge everyone else by the way they look on the outside as well. Is that true? Yeah, more often than it should be, right? Yeah. Taking time to present an attractive image in your person, your clothing, your grooming, and your accessories can have an inordinate impact on the doors that open for you and the people who are willing to help you start moving forward in your life. The most attractive, handsome people get the best jobs, the highest paying jobs. The first ones to get married, they're the attractive, handsome ones. If you want to be successful, make yourself beautiful and attractive. That's a message that goes, I mean, it's all over everywhere. In your magazines, wherever you look, make yourself attractive and beautiful. And that'll get you places, make you successful. We devote time and money to good looks, right? Every year, people in the United States spend $45 billion on fitness and gym memberships. I don't know how often they go, but they spend $45 billion. You know, just spending the money makes a difference to some people, okay? $45 billion on fitness and gym memberships. $20 billion on cosmetic surgery. Women spend $28 billion on cosmetics, and get this, men spend $11 billion. Whew. A year. We do whatever it takes to attain good looks. We're following it. We're pursuing it, right? I mean, that was one of the characteristics of idolatry. Pursue it, follow it, and spend money on it. We're convinced. Well, our Bibles are Women's Fitness, Men's Fitness, Oxygen, Runner's World. Our temples are Dillard's, Macy's, Walgreens. We're convinced that we shouldn't look sloppy or overly chubby. And we shouldn't. I'll grant that. So, we conclude that we can devote ourselves to physical exercise and fashion. And the conclusion is wrong. Conclusion is wrong. If we spend more time and money in physical training than spiritual training, we do not please God. 1 Timothy 4, verses 7 and 8. Have nothing to do with irreverent, silly myths. Rather, train yourself for godliness. For while bodily training is of some value, Godliness is of value in every way, as it holds promise for the present life and also for the life to come. So train yourself for godliness. Training physically, it has some benefit, and I used to run quite a bit, but I never believed in hurting myself to do it. Just kind of try to keep a little bit in shape. But what you've got to realize is that's not the end of all things. You can't make it your life. You can't get to the place where it determines your life. And yet there's people that are like that they're running. It's the first thing. If they don't get their running in, the whole world falls apart. The Bible says, Psalms 147, verse 10. We ought to turn there and look at that. Psalms 147, verse 10. His delight. We're talking about God's delight. God's delight is not in the strength of the horse, nor his pleasure in the legs of a man. But the Lord takes pleasure in those who fear him and those who hope in his steadfast love. God doesn't care how big calves you have. The Scottish people, the ones that wore the kilts, they love big calves. Yeah, maybe that's the reason they wear the kilts. I don't know. They like to show them off, but God doesn't take pleasure in a man's legs. Yeah, some people spend a lot of time building those biceps and those deltoids, or getting abs that look like six-packs. That's a big thing, But makes no difference to God. No difference to God. Train yourself for godliness. If we spend more time in physical training than spiritual training, then we have the wrong God. In 1 Samuel 16 and verse 7, when God was looking for a king, a second king. The first king looked like a king. He stood head and shoulders taller than anybody else. He had that regal appearance. But his heart was not toward God. God rejected him. And so God was looking for another king. And he sent Samuel to anoint him. And he went to the home of Jesse, and the hometown of Jesse, and called his sons in. And the first one, Eliab, came in, and he was a big, strong, strapping lad. And Samuel thought to himself, surely this is the one. Notice what God says. 1 Samuel 16 and verse 7. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. That's what makes a difference. It's the heart. That's what's important. It's the heart. So if we spend more time and money on physical training than spiritual training, we do not please God. And if we spend more time and money on good looks than good works, we do not please God. Turn in your Bible, if you would, to 1 Timothy 2, verses 9 and 10. If we spend more time and money on good looks than good works, we do not please God. It says here, likewise also that women should adorn themselves in respectable apparel with modesty and self-control, not with braided hair and gold or pearls or costly attire, but with what is proper for women who profess godliness with good works. I want to stop here just a moment just to kind of clarify some things before we go any further and deal with this, because this passage, I think, has been misunderstood in many ways. But what Paul says here in the beginning of that verse there, Likewise, also that women should adorn themselves with respectable apparel, with modesty and self-control, is a principle. Principles have to be applied. You have to exercise your conscience in order to do that, to discern good and evil. Okay, it's, if I command my son to go close the door, that's a command. He knows exactly what to do. But if I tell him, keep the house comfortable, that's a principle. He's going to have to exercise some judgment, right? And even principles can be couched in the terms of a command, like love one another. But love is a principle. You have to learn, you have to know how to apply it. And so if somebody's having a terrible day, you have to learn how to apply love. With some people, you go and you try to console them and help them, and they love that. But there's other people, oh no, you better stay away. Let everything cool off before you say anything. And love has to know the difference, right? Yeah, love has to know the difference, okay? So what we have here is a principle, and the principle is, and get the right verse here, that they adorn themselves in respectable apparel with modesty and self-control. So that's the principle. Now it goes ahead and lists 4 things. Braids, gold, pearls, costly attire. Now those are examples of things that can violate that principle. Okay? Now, they don't always violate it. Now this is something I want you to pay attention to, listen to. They don't always violate it. Braids don't always violate the principle of modesty and respectable behavior. I think most of us can say, well, yeah, we put braids in our girls' hair, and that's not a violation of modesty, right? It's not extravagant. It's not ostentatious. It's not pretentious. We understand that. Now, if you weaved gold and pearls and a bunch of stuff into it, then that would be what? Ostentatious. Okay, we have a gold wedding band. I'm wearing one. Is that pretentious? Is that ostentatious? I really don't believe it is. Okay. I have a watch. I have not this one, but I have some that I've had some that were gold colored. Okay. Were they pretentious? Timexes? I kind of doubt it. Okay. But I've seen people with Rolexes that were not gold, and what is that? That's pretentious, ostentatious, right? Okay? So you have to judge things. You have to apply the principle. The principle is it should be modest, it should be respectable, it should not be, in other words, ostentatious or pretentious. Okay? And so we kind of need to keep that in mind. Now, let's go on to try to apply this a little bit. You may wear, and by the way, the other thing is, those 4 things are not everything that can be ostentatious or pretentious. Like I said, the Rolex is ostentatious, pretentious. Okay? And so there's other things besides those 4 things that can violate the principle that was established there. All Paul is doing is giving 4 things that were very commonly misused and misapplied. Okay? So, there can be other things. You may not wear gold or pearls and still dress and exercise like you believe appearance will get the attention you want. So I'm saying you may not wear any of those things, but you can still make appearance and good looks your God. You can still do it. I remember a president, he's lived within my lifetime, he's now dead, who never wore the same tie twice. And that was back in the day when they wore ties almost every day. Now you figure it, I don't know what ties are selling now, $20 a piece, 300 days times $20, $6,000 a year for ties. I would say that is a little ostentatious, wouldn't you? One tie maybe wasn't, right? But to insist that you never wear the same tie twice sounds a little overboard to me. Sorry, ladies, I'm not using you as examples. I knew a preacher who got rid of his wife's gold wedding bands, and his too, their gold wedding bands, and bought more expensive platinum ones. Does that make much sense? You get right down to it? I don't think it makes much sense. Not only might you not wear any of those things that are listed, but you might still desire to call attention to yourself. You might not wear any of those things and still not glorify God. You might not wear any of those things and still not glorify God. My life has been, followed a little bit different path than a lot of people maybe, they wondered about it, okay? And I ended up preaching in a non-instrument church for a number of years. I was begged to. I turned him down twice and finally relented the third time. Felt a little bit like Moses, the burning bush. But I met a wonderful lady there, Johnny Conway. She was in her 80s. She had taught Sunday school to 3rd and 4th graders since 1956, I think it was, in Bellevue. She ended up still teaching until she was almost 90. Every Sunday. Those kids that came out of 3rd and 4th grade knew their Bibles. They knew all the Bible stories. All of them. She had the whole Bible story all the way around, painted on the wall, all the way around her classroom. Somebody came along while we were there and painted over it. I was kind of sorry to see that. She was 80 years old, and she still went to the hospital and volunteered every week because she believed it was her Christian duty to show love and compassion for people. And dear Johnny Conway wore lipstick. It's not one of these 4 things, I know, but I just wanted you to know that. I'm not sure if you'd known Johnny and seen her, you'd have thought she was pretentious or ostentatious. I don't think you'd have thought that at all. And personally, I don't really care for lipstick. Okay? But she did have love for people. And she was devoted. And that's what this passage is all about. If we make the way we appear our goal, and if we want people to notice us, we've missed the point. Because what we want people to see is God living in us. That's what we want them to see. So when we're more concerned about how we look to others than how we look to God, we're in real trouble. We have the wrong God. To introduce the third one, I would like to show you a couple pictures. This is Chinese migrant housing. When we first went to China, we were traveling on the bus or the train, I don't remember which one it was now, along the edge of Shanghai, going to where I was going to teach. And I saw these tents all along beside these high-rises. And I thought they were some kind of farmer's tents or something because I saw straw stacked up by them and stuff. And that's not what they are. That's housing. It's where the poor live. Building houses for the rich and living like this. These tents are filled with numerous families. And you can see no running water. They usually find a place where they can plug in a long cord so they have some electricity. No toilet facilities. And one family's here, another family's here, another family's here. Can you imagine living like that? I got paid 5,000 yuan a month, which is about 500 US dollars at the time, and I lived like a king. That was about 3 or 4 times the average annual salary of these people. That was 1 month of my salary. It was several times more than their annual salary. That's the way the people lived. Horrible. What do you think they're dreaming of? If they had a dream, what do you think they would dream of? Water. Yeah. Yeah. Bathroom. Yeah. A real kitchen. Yeah. Those are all things they could dream of. And you know, I just put that there because I want you to contrast that with what we have, the American dream. The American dream. What do we dream of? In Herbert Hoover's campaign of 1928, his slogan was, "A chicken in every pot and a car in every garage." Would that be your dream today? A chicken in every pot and a car in every garage? You kidding? I mean, in the 1930s, every family dreamed of a car in the garage. Now every member of the family dreams of a car. In the 1950s, we dreamed of a 983 square foot house. That was the average home size in the 1950s, 983 square feet. About 290 square feet per person. I helped some people move in Bellevue in the church up there when I was there. 2 people. Huge house. They moved to a huge apartment. You wouldn't believe how much stuff they had and how many rooms they filled. And even they commented about it. We have too much stuff. Way too much stuff. Today we dream of a house, the average house is 2,300 square feet. And the average space per person is 893 square feet, almost the size of the house before, per person. It's amazing. We went to China, and Sharon and I could only take 2 suitcases apiece. We had to live on that for a year. Well, it was a good thing we didn't take too much more because where we lived wasn't very big. You know, we don't dream of those things. We dream of big stuff, big time. I mean, I know that none of us here are really, really rich, okay? But we still have it pretty nice, don't we? And we dream of nice things. And we don't think anything about going and buying another cell phone or getting a second car for the wife, right? American homes and cars have become our gods. I really believe that. They've become gods. People follow the dream wherever it leads. Well, my house is getting kind of old. It's not exactly stylish. It's not in the right part of town. It's not in the suburbs or whatever. And we start looking for a new home. The one we have is comfortable. We get along. We got along in it for years, but we'd like something nicer, right? And our car. You know, our homes and our cars are dictated to us by our culture. Really, they are. They're dictated to us by our culture. Our culture determines what it is that we buy. in Bellevue, Nebraska, I was kind of looking at things, and Bellevue's zoning policy did not allow you to build a house valued less than $200,000. Well, what does that do for people that aren't really pretty well off? The only houses available to them are the old ones from back 1905, run down. You could not tear it down and build a house for $100,000. It was against the law. Our building practices are often, and our houses are determined culturally. And that's just one example. It's not always by law, it's just by what we want, what our culture desires. And so that's become our American dream. We pour money into the dream. Money for taxes, money for maintenance, money for improvements. Do you ever go to Menards or Lowe's on Saturday? Where are people spending their money? Home improvement. And what are they doing on Sunday? Improving, that's right. Yeah. The American dream is success. Our temples are Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards, Toyota, Lexus. We're convinced that there's nothing wrong with houses or cars. And there's not. So we conclude that we can build the house of our dreams and drive the car of our dreams. And the conclusion is wrong. Our Christianity indulges our desires instead of crucifying them. That's what happens. About the beginning of the year, I promised myself that I was not going to buy anything all year long that I didn't really need. I made it till May. And my wife and I like to go birding, especially I like to go birding, and she likes to go to be with me, and maybe she enjoys the birds too. And I'd always kind of wanted a camera that I could take pictures of birds with. I did it before I thought. Did I really need it? No. But our Christianity often indulges our desires instead of crucifying them. Mansions have displaced missions. You just walk outside and look at the parking lot. What do we see? Thousands upon thousands of dollars, right? And cars have displaced care for the lost and the needy. That's the way it's happened. Where we put our money tells where our God is. It's not exactly comfortable. You know, we're a rich country. We cannot imagine how rich we are unless we go to a third world country. We can't imagine it. But I think the truth is you cannot serve both God and the American dream. Can't do it. Matthew 6:24. No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. And if the American dream is our dream, just remember you can't serve both. Greedy people have no inheritance in the kingdom of heaven. Ephesians 5 verse 5, for you may be sure of this, that everyone who is sexually immoral or impure or who is covetous, that is, an idolater, has no inheritance in the kingdom of God. Now the word covetous there could just as easily be translated greedy. Because he's not talking about wanting what somebody else has and it's not yours. I mean, normally that's what we think of covetous, right? Is wanting what belongs to somebody else. But that's not what he's talking about here. He's simply talking about greed. One lexicon puts it this way: this person is one who would have more than others. Just wants more. More than anybody else. That's all he cares about. More. That's greed. And if that is your attitude, then you have no inheritance in the kingdom of God. Proverbs 11 verse 28 says, "Whoever trusts in his riches will fall, but the righteous will flourish like a green leaf." I would like to conclude with something I read in a book, a Chinese preacher by the name of Brother Yun, in a book entitled Living Water. Brother Yun was a Chinese preacher, spent years and years and years in prison, and finally escaped China. But he can't go back because he'd be put in prison again. But he's been preaching in the West. And I'd like you to listen to what he has to say. "Multitudes of church members in the West are satisfied with giving their minimum to God instead of their maximum. I've watched men and women during offering time in church. They open their fat wallets and search around for the smallest thing they can give. This type of attitude will never do. Jesus gave his whole life for us, and we give as little of our lives, time and money as we can back to God. What a disgrace. Repent." This may sound strange, but I even miss the offerings we used to give in China. On numerous occasions, the leader would announce, "We have a new worker who is leaving tomorrow to serve the Lord." Immediately, every single person would completely empty their pockets of everything they had. With that money, the worker would buy a train or bus ticket and leave the next day. And he's talking about people like this. Okay? In China today, most of the house church believers do not own much. Most are from poor farming communities and struggle to survive from one harvest to the next. Whatever they do have, however they give to God, there is no holding back. I remember some services when a small sack was passed around to collect the offering so that our evangelists could go to remote areas with the gospel. Many put everything they had in this world into the sack, for they realized nothing was more important than to participate in the saving of souls for Jesus. Even if it meant they would go without and face hardship, they were more than willing to do so if it meant just one more precious soul might be saved for all eternity. And then he goes ahead and mentions that he saw men and women weeping because they had nothing to put in the bag. Can you imagine that? And we dream the American dream. God is a jealous God. If we put entertainment or good looks or the American dream ahead of God, we need to remember God is a jealous God. I didn't announce this when I came up here. I would like to sing 144 if we could in closing. Can somebody play 144 maybe? It's in that same book that we used. It's a song of worship to our Almighty God.